Hey, and welcome to this short filler video. I'm sorry I haven't gotten around to uploading part 3 of Majora's Mask yet. The script is done and I've got all the images sorted, but I'm having issues with the editing software. Something about files being locked, I'm really not sure. I thought that it would be interesting to make a video about Tarrey Town in the meantime to elaborate on some of the concepts that I've introduced before and to provide a bit of filler content, obviously, but also to lay out something a little more concrete and perhaps even stimulating, if not somewhat provocative, perhaps. So let's get into it. In terms of side quests in Breath of the Wild, Tarrey Town is no doubt one of my favorites. It's tedious at first, but the secret shop makes the whole effort worthwhile if you ask me. I've also been thinking about its symbolic constituents a little as of late, and I've found that one can consider not only the symbolic structure, but also the political carryover, which I thought merits further conversation, albeit done carefully. So, Tarrey Town is gradually founded, built from the ground up, as the side quest title suggests. It isn't just built at any old place, however. The pattern found within the area where it is built, as well as within the structure of the architecture of the town itself, overlaps with those found in religious and historical architecture as well as literature. Archaic societies across the world all went about inhabiting new territory according to certain patterns. Depending on whether the society was made up of hunters or farmers or the circumstances of the founding or the patterns of foundation, the patterns of foundation would range from the occurrence of a theophany, which is a revealing of some kind of divine force, like Jacob's dream in the Bible, where he sees a ladder, ranges to the evocation of divine presence by hunting an animal, or to the emulation of the cosmogony as brought about by their respective gods. And in all cases, these people sought to found their habitats on a sacred place, a center, which is a term that I've used before. The center is the place where the homogeneity of space is interrupted by a point of reference. There is a place that is superordinately real by contrast. It makes orientation possible. It is an orderly place amidst the enveloping chaos, and therefore it is the only discriminable place, which is what makes it inhabitable and real for all intents and purposes. Just as how the world was created by the word in the Bible, Logos is the force that can categorize and discriminate and can therefore constitute human experience in vision and language and thought even. The center is where all layers of being, hell, earth, and heaven, are interconnected and the communication with the gods can be established. It is where divine power can be experienced. That's what theophany is. This is what makes it a sacred place, and the most important place. It's the central place. It's the center. The connection from heaven to earth is symbolized by things such as pillars and vaults, and the pillar can also take a form of a tree or a mountain. And in the case of Tarrey Town, it is a statue of the goddess Hylia. Hudson chooses this place because he sees a sign of divine presence there. The Vedic people would also choose an altar as their central point, to invoke the presence of the Hindu god Agni, who was one of the guardian deities of direction, as he was a being of fire, and fire was considered by them one of the 5 permanent constituents of reality. I think that's about right. However, in Hudson's case, he chooses to build his town in a place where he can already find an indication of a divine presence. The statue of Hylia is what evokes his theophany. And this might remind us of Jacob's dream again, where Yahweh revealed his presence to him, whereupon Jacob chose to indicate the sacredness of that place where he had the dream with an anointed stone, kind of like an altar or a statue of Hylia, let's say. So the statue of Hylia then is the central axis for Tarrey Town. It is the place that everything else is built around later. You also see a pillar being erected with a bell in it, which further elaborates on the Axis Mundi symbolism because, well, I'll just quote from my dictionary of symbols here. Its sound is a symbol of creative power. Since it is in a hanging position, it partakes of the mystic significance of all objects which are suspended between heaven and earth. It is related by its shape to the vault and consequently to the heavens. That's from J.E. Surlott's Dictionary of Symbols. This is very much in line with what I've discussed so far. Now I'd like to direct your attention towards the pond that is around the statue of Hylia. In the Mesopotamian tradition, which is of course closely related to Christianity, say, the world was depicted as a disc on top of which is a dome, but below the disc there's water. And this pattern is present in the center of Tarrey Town, where it is a pond of water, on top of which stand the statue of Hylia and a pillar with a vault on it. And so this pattern is repeated on the rock on which Tarrey Town stands, which is surrounded by water, with, again, the pillar and the vault being on top of the rock. Likewise, I read that it is said of the Temple of Jerusalem that the rock on which it is founded is very deeply embedded into what the Hebrews call Tehom, which is like the dark mass before the creation, which is, the word Tehom is derived of Tiamat, and we've talked about Tiamat in the previous video. It's that salt water at the bottom of the Mesopotamian world representation. And this is also the bare bone frame of Genesis, where God comes down upon the earth onto the water, the dark water, and then of course he creates the world, which I hear is a pattern that is repeated over and over in the Bible. I've seen it once or twice repeated so far. It's pretty interesting how the Bible works. It's kind of a hyperlinked document or something. So in a very real sense, Hudson is then emulating the creation of the world, which is the way our ancestors actually viewed the occupation of a new territory. We've already discussed the Vedic tradition, but also in other Hindu traditions, there would be an astrologist that would indicate a place where the master mason was to drive a pole into the ground so as to pin down the world-supporting snake, so that a house could be built there. And that whole snake thing, it's meant to imitate one of the Indian heroes who, Hindu heroes, that is to say, who struck a giant snake's head with a lightning bolt or something like that. I forgot how the story went. But anyway, I think I've made the idea sufficiently intelligible now that, and it should be clear how these practices and stories relate to the foundation of Tarrey Town. So Hudson establishes Tarrey Town in a place where a hierarchy exists, from water to earth to heaven. And this idea of the hierarchy is very important, so I request that you keep the concept in mind for later in the video. So, like a kind of Abraham, Hudson sets out to settle and establish his own nation, let's say. However, unlike the biblical founders who sought to install their own people, Hudson fills his domain with foreigners. Now this is where things start to get a little sketchy, because there are some glaring analogies to be made there to the multicultural West, which is not necessarily, I'm not implying that this is done so by design, but it is the kind of thing that you would see in a video game or a movie released in 2017. There seems to be a real emphasis on the elements of diversity, which is something that you hear very often, obviously, nowadays. However, in this video, I would like to apply some nuance and look at the way that this works out in Tarrey Town, because it's not quite the same as what is being advocated in the public discourse. So let me get right to the point here. When Hudson suggests potential places to look for people that he needs, he's coming at it from a very specific way, which is not diversity of race. He's soliciting for a competent person, and based on commonly known abstractions of something approaching layman's statistics, or I suppose you would call that a stereotype, that's how he suggests a place to look. There are some rocks that need to be mined. Who's going to do that? Which people are always busy mining? Who specializes in that? Who has the adequate build? Who has the experience to engage in such an activity? Well, a Goron. Who would be the fittest tradesman? A Rito, obviously. They can get about the easiest. They can fly, for goodness sake. So, which people are the most advanced in terms of spirituality or culture in general, it looks like? I mean, have you seen Sora's domain? That's the place I would look for a priest. And so, what is the fashion capital of the world? Where are you going to get your wedding dress? Well, the fashion capital of the world seems like a good idea. Okay, let's go to Gerudo Town. That's where the Gerudo live. And he wasn't even soliciting for a Gerudo specifically. That just happened to be the case. So it's diversity of competence, diversity of ideas, not of race per se. Is there a diversity of identity in Tarrey Town? Yes, to some extent there is. They're all bringing their own identity with them and their own culture and their own talents, but there is a catch. The inhabitants of Tarrey Town have some kind of superordinate identity, which they acknowledge in accepting the established hierarchy of Tarrey Town. They're not building their own idols. They're not making their own rules. They organize life around the center of their town, and they comply to the Bolson construction naming policy. Now hear me out here. Now this policy might seem a little arbitrary and rather silly, but if you look at it symbolically the way that I've been speaking about this, it starts to really make sense. They all have something in common in a very real sense, which is that they all have similar names. And a name is a category, it's a word, and so it is discrimination, it is identity. They are citizens of Tarrey Town first, and whatever else they might be second. It is an integration-oriented system, but it's not unkind to strangers. It's buzzing with trade of all sorts of people from all over the map. They're taking part in this. But it isn't globalism either. Tarrey Town isn't trying to swallow up Hyrule and form one big totalitarian super town empire. That's going to cost you about a cup of coffee a day or something. It's very clearly itself while being made up of a great deal of other things. It's a melting pot and not a salad bowl. A salad has no overarching flavor, no unity in texture. A soup, on the other hand, does, yet the separate ingredients can still be tasted. Yes, I do think Tarrey Town could be somewhat of a role model to the new nationalist movements that have been proliferating over the past few years. Me? You can call me Yogun-san from now on. I'm off to make some money and not get taxed into next week. Hippity hoppity, fellas. I'm off. Well, okay. I hope you enjoyed this video. I think that I've been sensible about this. I think this is more accessible than the content that I've produced so far. It's less... I'm not being, trying to be, like, this weird spiritual person and trying to dissect the meaning of life while also talking about a video game. I'm quite frank, I'm quite clear in my analogies. Yeah, I think this is really the kind of standard that I want for my content. Maybe the videos aren't going to be 10 minutes all the time or anything. I'm not gonna go PewDiePie on you guys, but You know, I think I'm taking these in a good direction. Please let me know in the comments below, and as always, you're welcome to take part. I can refer you to the research Discord or the discussion, whatever. I'll just create it once people indicate interest. And well, yeah, that's about it for the end slate. So see you next time, guys.